Beyond the Strange.
Natural and unexplained phenomena.
Spiritual activity.
Cryptids. The future and the past.
Conspiracies.
Beliefs and ancient remains. The radio program for you, the listener, and bringing your stories and concerns to the table. And now your hosts, Dave C. and Brian Anderson.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave C., and with us is Brian Anderson. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have a special night tonight. We have Christopher P. Garetano to talk about the Montauk Chronicles and his future projects. How's your evening going, Brian?
Oh, it's going pretty good. A little tired today. Got up extra early and a shout out to Gordon out there. I'm sorry about what happened this morning, brother.
Yes. Definitely positive thoughts going out to our brother Gordon out there, and hopefully he makes a good recovery. And I mean, we have a big bad moon rising tonight. It's our super moon that everyone's been talking about, or as other people would call it, the blood moon. And we made it through September 23rd. I mean, we're still here, so hopefully tonight we will be the same. We are live here on Google Hangouts, streaming from YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015. The hashtag is BeStrange with the letter B, and then the word strange after that. We also have a Beyond the Strange Facebook page where I post most of the show's infos and updates, that is. There is a Google Plus Beyond the Strange profile, and our email is beyondthestrange@gmail.com. Also, I forgot to announce last week, big announcement. We have the Beyond the Strange website. Yay!
Yay!
It's under construction, but it's there nonetheless. So please keep checking for updates where we'll have our future guests, and we'll have updates and a lot of other great material for everyone to look at. And finally, you can join the show with your Gmail account, or you can call in on Skype. The Skype ID is Strange Days 2015. A little bit about this blood moon, Brian, that's coming up. There's been a lot of talk in the news about it, and one of the articles I read about this is the Mormon Church put out some information out there. I guess they had one of their followers, or however you want to call them, and she's an author. She wrote a book back in 2004. I guess she had a brush with death, and she made some predictions, and it seems like everyone's being scared, from reading this book. But there is a lot of stuff going on right now. I mean, it's almost impossible to get away from this blood moon scenario. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I read the same story, and I can't remember what all the predictions were about. That was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago that I read that story about her. But yeah, they have the Mormons have really gathered around this lady who was one of their own, and yeah, it's kind of strange. But this whole blood moon, with what we went with a couple weeks ago, like I was saying a couple weeks ago, this mainly has to do with the Hebrew prophecies with the Jewish people, and that after a blood moon like this, with the tithing and everything that they were supposed to do, that they didn't, that supposedly God punished them, and supposedly the Jewish people suffer quite a bit after one of these blood moons, either with war or financially. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting one way or the other. I don't think it'll be anything dramatic right off the bat. It may take weeks or months for us to see the end results of this. But like I said, I don't think it's going to be anything dramatic that's going to change overnight.
I'm hoping not. I'd really like to finish my school I just started, my classes. It'd be really great. But nonetheless, it's always good to be prepared. And I personally think that, those who are prepared right now, they're not really scared, so to say. I mean, they're probably just looking at this like, it's just another day. And maybe we should all look at it that way. I mean, there's nothing really we can do anyway if something bad happens.
Yes, I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's nothing really we can do about it other than roll with the punches and try to be as prepared as possible, and which is a good scenario to go anyways, especially, with natural disasters and everything. It's always a good idea to be prepared at least a little bit to be able to survive a week or two on your own, regardless.
Yes, I don't have a bunker myself, but I do have, the basics. Like I have like 3 to 4 big tanks of water. And on top of that, I probably have about 6 cases of bottled water. We have lots and lots of different canned foods and dried foods. Ramen's always good. Also, I believe there's that Knorr soup mix it's in like a bottle that you buy off the shelf. It's kind of like bouillon. And what I was told that if you put some of that in some hot water and make it like soup, that you can live on that for a while too, as well. But we can do prepping another time. I just wanted to put that out there, folks. If anything goes south, just be prepared. That's all you can do. And I think if we get past this, everyone should really think about taking care of each other and not fighting so much, and just really appreciate each other. And if everyone could do that, especially our government and other countries, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that worries me the most about all this is the financial markets. Um, it seems to go on like every 7 to 10 years. So, that's the main thing that I have a worry about, is watching the downfall of the financial markets in and of themselves over the next couple months.
Yes, I've been keeping an eye on that myself, and I'm really happy that the Feds didn't raise the rates, as some predicted that might have happened, and that would have just been terrible on their part, and not very good timing, especially with all this going on with China and Greece, and yeah, it just really shook a lot of people. But tonight we're going to talk again. We're going to talk with Christopher Garetano, and we're going to talk about the Montauk Chronicles, and we're going to talk about other things. He does have another project coming up. We're going to let him talk about that, and we'll be back after this first break. So stick around, everybody.
Hello. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Chris, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Hey, Chris, how's it going? Welcome back, everyone. We're live on Beyond the Strange. I am Dave C., your host, and we are here with Christopher Garetano. How's it going, Christopher?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm sorry. I'll just call you Chris. Is that okay?
Either way is fine. That's cool.
All right, brother. I'm trying not to butcher too much of your name there either. But how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. You know, moving right along. Looking forward to this conversation. And it seems to never get old. You know, it's ever evolving, and we discover new things. I guess depending on who's asking me questions, and you know, I just know from experience, from my own experience, and everybody has their own perspective. But it's great to share stories about this subject matter.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, like I said, I've watched the movie probably 2 or 3 times. It's fabulous, and the filmmaking on you know, the cinematography and the filmmaking is just amazing, bro. And I really mean
thank
that.
you.
Really mean that. So, were you always a sci-fi fan?
Yes, yeah. Since I was a little kid, you know, I grew up in a very you know, movie fanatic family. So, and they owned a video store when I was a kid. So I was just immersed in film and comic books and everything. So, you know, I got to see everything when I was a kid. I got to see it, I guess, everything that my parents saw when they were kids. So I saw old science fiction films, you know, much older, everything from the 50s and, you know, Universal Monsters and stuff like that. And I was obsessed with the paranormal when I was a kid. You know, at the time it was supernatural or mysteries of the unknown. And I have a, you know, extensive book collection that started when I was a little kid in regard to the paranormal. And I still have it. So it was always an interest. And it wasn't until I met Alfred Bielik that I had someone sitting in front of me telling me that all of the science fiction that I grew up watching is actually true. Before that, there were little things here and there that were based on truth. A lot of things we couldn't prove, and they were always interesting. But now I'm sitting in front of, you know, 3 men, different locations, of course, making Montauk Chronicles, and I have grown elderly men telling me all of the science fiction I've ever known is actually true.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about Montauk. You went there vacationing, correct?
As a kid, yeah, you know, because that's what it is. It's in the summertime, it's a vacation spot. It's the ocean, you know, the Atlantic Ocean. The beaches are great, and a lot of families are there. People camp out. They have summer festivals. There are resorts all over the place on the beach. But in the wintertime, it's kind of desolate. Right now, it's a little more populated, and especially because of the Camp Hero legends and how large they've grown, I'd say they have a lot more visitors to Camp Hero now than ever. But if you rewind back to when I was a kid, or even in the 90s, there was barely anybody there, even in the early 2000s. It wasn't until, I don't know, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago or so that it really started picking up with people, and people kept going out to Camp Hero to visit and explore and start their own investigations. But yeah, it was still an obscure story. There was a few books on the subject matter, and a few guys, and literally just a few guys telling the story for a number of years, almost 20 years. You know, there wasn't a lot of people, and now there are a lot of people that claim they were part of it. And so when I got involved in the movie, it was just after my first film. And, you know, that was a very low budget documentary, but I got it out there into the world called Horror Business. And I was in Las Vegas. The movie's about 4 different independent movie makers, you know, trying to kind of break into the business at different levels, into the film business. And one of the subjects in Las Vegas was conspiracy obsessed. He knew I was from New York, and he knew I was familiar with the alleged Montauk project, and he suggested that my next docudrama or documentary should be about that. And I wanted to make something on the paranormal next, but I wasn't necessarily going to cover Montauk. And I recalled the first book by Preston Nichols, and I felt it was just, you know, it was abridged. There wasn't much there. I didn't really like how it was laid out, and I wasn't really interested in adapting that into a movie. So the only thing that I was interested in doing was starting fresh, as if I only know a little bit about it, and the idea was, let's go to the source. The only three men that are telling this story in the world, and I want to hear it from them from the very beginning. And that's how it started. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So regardless of all the conjecture that's on the internet that really only surfaced while I was making this film, it wasn't before, and you know, the books that are out there, I kind of avoided all of that because, well, what better way to investigate than to begin your own investigation? So the men that put this tale out into the world are in my movie, and they're telling the story right there. So that's the idea. I didn't, you know, I can't adapt someone else's book, and regardless, a lot of those books, with all due respect to some of them, are from a biased perspective, and I wanted a neutral perspective. I wanted to go in saying, hey, wait a second. You know, we don't have evidence for this thing, but I have your story, and I want to hear your story, and that's interesting enough, and I'll do my best to illustrate it, and we can start to absorb what you have to say, and then we'll go to the site, we'll go to the base, we'll talk to witnesses, we'll talk to people, because there really isn't much to go on, and there wasn't in the beginning of this. There's a little bit more now, though, like at this moment, that only surfaced in the last 8 months or so. So before that, really wasn't much except for these 3 or 4 witnesses that are out there. And Duncan is very elusive, and I spoke to him on the phone a couple of times, but he's not, as you can see, he's not out there doing interviews. So we had 3 guys. That was it.
James Bruce, I saw at the beginning of the movie, but then later on towards the end of the movie, he had more to say about how experiments are still going on. Is that the case?
Again, I can't say for sure if they are. What fascinated me about James was he came in very late in the situation. I made 2 movies, 2 separate movies. The first one was completed in late 2011, and I showed it around at different festivals and venues throughout 2012. I wasn't happy with it. So I remade the movie from top to bottom, and it took about 4 years to make that first one. And the only thing that carried over from the other movie, and this is because Alfred Bielek passed away in 2011, was his interview. Yeah. Okay. So I started from scratch in January of 2013 and made a whole new movie, reinvestigated the whole thing because I felt like I needed to go further. I needed to, just find more. And so that's how it started. And, I re-interviewed Preston Nichols and I re-interviewed Stuart Swerdlow. And by the time I had it finished, James Bruce shows up. Now, I was contacted by a few people that claimed they were part of the Montauk experiments. And I was very respectful, as I am with everybody. And I just told them, look, I'm almost finished with this. I might do another volume, so sit tight. But there was something about James that was different because to me, and I'm not calling anybody out in particular, but I've seen people out there that are, in my opinion, are lying about whatever experience. And it's not just about Montauk, but they're lying about their experiences because they're kind of easy to figure out. If you have someone that's out there that is telling you a story that you can match up to in a history book, okay? And then he's kind of mixing it in with his own thing. Most likely he's lying. When someone's telling you their own perspective through and through, they'll tell you other things that are unique to their own experience. And so I've noticed people like that. So they're always naming the things that were in, and these aren't, the Montauk books that came out, they're not history books. You can't prove them. Right. But in regard to people who claim they're time travelers and they confronted one historical person after another, they're only citing stories that you can literally reference in history books that have been around for hundreds of years or 100 years. So it's like I wouldn't really listen to them if those stories match up to a history book. But if it's a unique story, and in James Bruce's case, that's what it was. It felt like his perspective, his personal perspective. It wasn't like he was doing his homework. And I liked that, because if you're a witness to something, why the hell do you have to do your homework? You're just telling me an experience that you went through. So it's my job to kind of just listen and absorb and really stay at that neutral place, very careful ears, you know. And you can't be a person who just wants to hear that it's all true, because that's a mistake. You're not an investigator then. You're just someone who is trying to fulfill that kind of almost egotistical desire. So from my spaces, I love mysteries, but this one scares the hell out of me. And the idea that people were just being kidnapped and murdered and being used for these experiments is terrifying to me. Because I was taking it seriously. And James's story just strikes me as a guy who went through something. Now, I didn't have a lot of time to, I shot a few hours with him. And there's very little of him in the movie, only because it came in so late and it was difficult enough to kind of incorporate new stuff when it was already finished. But I want to hear more from him. So in the next volume, you're going to hear a lot more from James. But there was just something about him, something that seemed to be uniquely his own experience, his own perspective.
I don't want to jump the gun too fast, but do you think there might be a Montauk 2?
Oh, there is. I already started to shoot it, but I wasn't going to do it. Yeah, but I felt it's necessary. I'm not going to repeat myself at all. I feel like the initial story was told very well by these guys, because there really isn't much more than what they're saying. Yeah, there's stuff that, there's tangential stuff like the Philadelphia experiment and things like that, but that has nothing to do with really the Montauk Project. And again, you can't prove that. Al says he told me those stories. I recorded those way back in '06 when I was sitting with him in Fort Myers, Florida. And some people have asked, well, why didn't you cover this or why didn't you cover that? Well, there's only so much time, and I think it was very important that we established in the best way possible what this Montauk Project thing was. And so that was my goal, and I avoided the tangents, because there are many of them. And some of those tangents kind of went, 25%, and then would fade out when it comes to giving us details, or true details. Like I've been through some things, and I can recall details of the situation, some interesting dramatic situations. I can sit here and tell you for the next 4 hours something that happened in a 20-minute period, because it's so detailed, it's so stark. So I pay attention to things like that, telling the story. And if you were part of an experiment that there were extraterrestrials around and that people were being murdered by the thousands, you better be ready to tell me some details, especially if you witnessed it with your own eyes. There's a lot of texture in the situation. So those are the things I was looking for when I was interviewing.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The next chapter is going to be called Ghosts of Montauk, and it will cover all of the things that I felt would have interfered with the core thread of the story. And now I can put it in a second volume.
Looking forward to that.
Thanks.
We are Beyond the Strange. We were talking with Christopher Garetano, and this is Beyond the Strange. Chris, I wanted to ask you about Eric Swanson. And he
Yes.
was your co-producer, or he was part of the movie also, right?
Well, he wasn't a producer, but he was a great friend of many years, and we went to film school together, and a great guy to have along, because he has this kind of skeptical edge to him, and
yes.
I think we're a good balance when we're working together, and we have a lot of conversations, and just a helpful person to have around, and a knowledgeable person, and a great guy to listen to, because he has a pretty decent perspective of his own. Sometimes I feel a little overly skeptical. He might shut the door on some possibilities, but yeah, Eric was a great guy to have around at times, during the making of this film.
Yeah, it seemed like his perspective was don't trust the government. And it just falls right into, this whole topic of what's going on is all the secrets that our government has been hiding from us and what they've been doing behind, closed doors. it's really scary. And for the listeners right now, I just kind of wanted to back up a little bit and talk about, when you were talking, or actually when you were investigating, did you get any type of, I don't know, military or some kind of personnel coming after you or anybody else when you guys were on the grounds, especially at the tower?
When I was, we planned, it was Paul Fagan, who at one time was a Montauk local, and
Mm-hmm.
Paul really knows his way around Camp Hero. He was exploring, geographically the base and exploring that place for, I don't know, 10 to 15 years. So he knew it extremely well. He knows it extremely well. And he was the best guy to have there. But we did plan that day. It was, I don't know if it was exactly winter. It was late fall, I think, when we went down there, or possibly even early spring. It was a while ago. And I'm sorry, it was early spring or late fall. And we were there, and we made sure it was a time where no one was going to be around. And a lot of the time when it is that time of the year, it's pretty much a ghost town. Montauk is not overly populated in the winter months. And my encounters with security mostly occurred when it was summertime, or I was out in front of the gates shooting. But we pulled a covert move, went in a back, entrance basically through the woods, and we made our way over to the tower because I wanted to get inside. I honestly, in my heart of hearts, did not expect to find anything. I don't think it was going to be that easy, especially after I learned, and as you can see in a lot of my footage, on the interior of the base, it's kind of a hangout, and now even a lot of people are going down there to hang out, spray paint the side. It's starting to look like the South Bronx over there. It's like, they're spray painting the South Bronx circa 1979, but they're spray painting the sides of the buildings and all this stuff, and it's like, Camp Hero didn't look that way when I first went there, but now there are murals everywhere, and it's that accessible. Two things to note: that there are some heavily secured places that are curious to me, and if someone wanted to go the extra mile and get into those things, you might find a way to the underground, one of which are the bunkers, these giant cement slabs that are covering the entrances to the bunkers. Okay, those are completely sealed. The entrances that go underground, and I guess they're either drainage tunnels or they lead to the infamous tunnels. They're all cemented shut or flooded. And then at the end of the picture, you notice that James leads me to this place, and I literally had not seen that place until he showed me. And that was after years of exploring that base. Even Paul didn't know it was there. That was welded shut and cemented shut. And my question is, the tower itself, you can get in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just plywood keeping them out at times. And other structures, just are either wide open or you can get in through the plywood. I'm not suggesting to break in, but you could if you really wanted to. But those other structures, someone paid a lot of attention to, and they put the extra effort into sealing shut and welding shut. And I'm just curious as to why it was necessary to weld those things shut, and that also those are the places that people are saying that you could get into, very specific places like an experiment room or the underground tunnels. And I guess for your audience, maybe I should just give a little, like a quick origin story and a background of the entire Montauk project. I don't know if everyone knows. Okay, so it's really, what we're talking about here is a place that's about 150 miles east of New York City, at the very, very tip of Long Island, New York. And it's an Air Force base that's been there for a number of years, but the men in my picture claim that between 1971 and 1983, there were a variety of experiments that allegedly happened beneath the base. And they say everything from this really brutal mind control experiment where runaway kids were being kidnapped from New York City and all over Long Island, brought down there, beaten to death with the purpose of kind of breaking their psychology to the point where they could implant trigger images and words and rebuild their minds to make them psychic soldiers or Manchurian candidate type assassins. And then there's also word that there was time travel experiments there from several of the alleged witnesses, that there was reverse engineering of alien technologies down there, and that there were a variety of extraterrestrials all underneath this base. So according to the men in my picture, I mean, this was like a mecca of all paranormal happenings. Everything that you could possibly think of occurred beneath that Air Force base between 1971 and 1983. So essentially what I did was I heard these stories. There were a few books written about it by the time I started my picture, and I wanted to avoid anyone else's perspective and begin fresh with my own. And that's where we started.
These three gentlemen, Stuart Swerdlow and Preston Nichols and Alfred Bielik, did they all know each other before you started conducting your research into the movie?
Yeah, they did. They met each other, so I hear from all three of the men, that in the late 80s and early 90s, there were, obviously, no one was really using the internet at all. So there were these small gatherings of people who were interested in UFO abductions, and they would tell tales and different paranormal stories. And there was a gathering in New York City, and Preston Nichols was there, Alfred Bielik was there, and Stuart Swerdlow had arrived at a later gathering. But that's where these guys met together. But all of them were having their individual recollections, their individual experiences, according to them, before that. So they got together at some of these events before, and according to them, their memories were being sparked by that interaction between each other. Then the stories began to be told. I was very skeptical of this for quite some time, but it wasn't until I learned the details of the MK Ultra experiments and the Tuskegee experiments, and when Bill Clinton came in front of the American people and the world in 1995 and admitted to that some strange factions of the government were involved in experiments that were almost identical in many ways to the alleged Montauk project, that opened my mind very wide, and I started to believe in the possibilities, and I started to reevaluate this a little bit, and thought that, okay, I had a few questions. Is it possible? And I even asked Stuart Swerdlow this. I did not have the opportunity to ask Al this question, but I did ask Preston. Is it possible? Is it possible that, yes, you were part of this experiment, but that a lot of the supernatural experiences that you recall having, is it possible that these things were staged to cover up a mass murder? And they said, yes, it's possible, but that's not what their memories tell them. And they're not saying that. I offer that as one possibility, because only just because how the story's laid out seems to me that it's written. It is written. If you look at that first book, it's got the, everybody saves the day at the end. They unleash the monster from the id. He tears at the base, doesn't kill anyone. He's a nice monster. He just beats up the base and saves the day, and mind control project is crashed, and that's how the book ends. It seems like it's just wrapped up a little too tight. I'm a storyteller and a writer, and to me, it just doesn't seem real life, even if it's supernatural. It just doesn't occur to me. So it's just too conveniently the end of the story.
No, absolutely.
Things I've learned since then lead me to believe that, yes, hey, maybe there was reverse engineering of alien technology there, and maybe a lot of these things did happen, but I think the most atrocious thing, and what was avoided in that first book was the mass murder of these kids.
Mhm.
So I wanted to focus on that for the film.
Yes, and speaking of that, it appears that Stewart was one of the abductees that went through this horrific experience, and we'll talk about the little alien in gray a little bit, later. But just the process of how he was abducted and tortured, and then later on reprogrammed. It just falls within a lot of how these abductees back in the 70s and early 80s, they that this is what happened to them. Can you give us a little take about what your conversation with Stewart?
Yeah, now again, I interviewed Stewart once in '06, then went back in 2013. The second time around, I said to Stewart, we knew each other better by then, and he was more comfortable with me being around. I mean, the first day I met him in '06 is the same day I interviewed him. So by the time 2013 rolls around, I think we were better prepared, because in interview there's a lot of things that can make someone inhibited. We could really like stifle their their expression and things that are very important when you're talking to somebody about a subject matter like this. So I told him, okay, I'm going to ask you the hard questions because it's important, and I just want you to be comfortable, because when you're interviewing somebody, they should be comfortable. If you're making them uncomfortable, like many television crews tend to do, they come off very stiff, as if they're reading lines. And if you watch a lot of those shows, it's exactly how everything comes across, because most of the time they are reading lines. But in this case, I literally tried to make him feel as comfortable as possible. The only other person that was in the room was Eric Swanson. That's it. There was nobody else. So we both, we would have a dinner, we would sit down, we would talk for a little while, and then prepare for this interview. And I interviewed Stewart, the one that you're seeing in the picture, over the course of about 3 days, on and off. And, okay, these are traumatic experiences. These are things that he recalls. I mean, abuse, abduction. We had a moment to absorb, his childhood a little bit. And I mean, his honesty comes through. At the very least, I feel like he recalls these as his own memories. And he told us a tale that began in his early childhood, that he remembers being in his bed, and in the middle of the night, he would see things in his room. Something would, change. The atmosphere would change. Light would come through the window, and then there would be beings, moving through his room. At one point, he called them clear people. So they would, I tried to represent that somewhat in the film, but there was this energy being that moved through his room. The next thing he knew, he would be at Camp Hero. And Alfred Bielek basically supports the same story by saying that when they were working to extract children, it wasn't just physical kidnapping, but also there was a wormhole technology that was derived from alien technology, and that they were literally extracting children from their bedrooms. Now, again, we don't have any proof of this, but I wanted to hear the stories, and I wanted to allow the audience to see these men telling this tale, because I think that in itself is interesting. Just that someone's going to tell you this, and that you can see a lot if you really pay attention and really listen. We have this inherent lie detector, and I'm not suggesting that the men in my picture are lying, but sometimes it's important to stay at that neutral ground and observe. Just observe. You don't have to make any decisions. You could watch this movie and decide on how you feel in years from now. But it's still interesting to see, because these guys are putting this out there not as fiction, but as truth. They, one man took it to his grave. Alfred Bielek took his whole story to his grave. So never turned around and said I was lying. So, and I'm not sure if that's the nature of somebody who would make up the hoax. Not everybody on the deathbed admits to. I just find it to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, I'm just saying that sometimes you have a lot of programs or television shows that always kind of lure you in with this promise of some big revelation. Well, my picture doesn't end on an arbitrary point, but there's no big, I think that the experience is to go through this whole thing, to see the investigation, to listen to these men tell the tale, and then of course see the movie scenes. I think that in itself is the full meal, you know. We're not always going to have a big answer at the end, and I don't know why people even look for it. That's not the promise here. The idea is that you go through this experience with me and that you absorb it for yourself, and possibly even begin your own investigation after that, but it does require a person to get up and go somewhere. I feel that going on YouTube and listening to biased conjecture is not an investigation. It could be part of it, because you need to learn everything. But you truly need to get down to Camp Hero. And the cool thing about Camp Hero is, if you are going to investigate, unlike, you know, Groom Lake or Area 51, places like that, you can walk on the base legally. Now, you can't legally get in the tower, but you can get in. But Camp Hero is a state, so legally you're allowed to go to that base, take pictures, walk around, and take photos, do anything you want, observe as much as you want. I mean, I think that's the greatest part about this particular mystery. It's at our access. We can go there. Who knows if the laws are going to change, but as this story becomes more popular, right now you can legally go to the base.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, especially the testimony of Stewart and Preston, and maybe we could talk a little bit about Preston also. He seems like a very intelligent person. At some point, I believe he said he was taking the IQ test back then. They only went up to like 200, and he was acing those tests.
That's what he says.
Yeah, and I mean, he seems like it too. And he talks about how our technology within the last 50 years have just jumped leaps and bounds because of the alien technology that has been given to us by these visitors. But then again, he says something that he doesn't quite remember everything, that he seems that maybe his memory was wiped somehow. I'm not sure if am I saying that correctly, or?
Yeah, well, Stewart says that he's always retained his memories, so he never had his memories wiped at all. And I'm going to offer another interesting story in a moment, but Preston and Al do claim that they had their memories wiped after they were put back into civilization, and not in the project anymore. But then they later on started to recall things. So Preston started to recall these things slowly. And one of the reasons why, I guess, when confronted as to why this story is so convoluted sometimes, is that they say, it's coming from fragmented memories. I can't give you all the details. So that's, but Stewart can, he said he never forgot anything. And an interesting thing is someone who's very close to me told me a story of a UFO, when they witnessed a UFO. And they said that when they saw the craft, it was as if, and a lot of people have said this, that time kind of slowed down, and that your normal reaction time, where you might want to get excited and grab your camera and take a picture and all that stuff, it was completely subdued, and it was slowed down to a crawl. And so it's possible that when around, especially alien technology, there could be some kind of energy put out that keeps you in a frame of mind that's not unlike hypnosis. So, because that's what they explained to me. They said that they felt hypnotized. So interesting stuff. And then we've probably heard this from other people too that have been abducted. They lost time, and Stuart Swerdlow claims, and Alfred Biela claims, and Preston Nichols all claim that there's this wormhole technology that they were able to extract you from one point, bring you into the project, and then put you back basically at the same time that you were extracted from. Really interesting stuff, but we don't have any proof of this stuff working. So again, these are good stories, and I don't say I don't disbelieve them. It's just, if a true investigation is looking for some kind of tangible evidence, end of story. If you're not looking for that, and then you're just supporting things that someone is telling you without even bothering to try and find some kind of tangible evidence or something to support it, and you're not really investigating, just kind of repeating the stories told. So I really, and to this moment, am doing my best to keep this as an investigation. And what I've found in my investigation so far were some very compelling stories, some very interesting people. And, you know, comparing it to things that have happened in the past, I would put it past any of the governments of the world to have done something like this. And a lot of witnesses that I spoke to, seen things out at Camp Hero, everything from UFO sightings to spotting Junior, you know, in the woods, which is that energy creature that Preston claims came out of the mind of the psychic at the very end of the
yeah.
So, you know, a lot of stories, and I'm still absorbing everything. But the one thing that I've kept my mind on this whole time, and unfortunately sometimes, because it is kind of a bummer, is that I believe that there could have been a project there that there was mind control being designed there with human subjects, and those human subjects were conveniently taken off the street as they've done, you know, as it's been conducted in the past by leading people under false pretenses and bringing them into a program like this, or like the Tuskegee experiment, or like MK Ultra, and completely brutalizing them for their own, I guess, scientific purposes, if that's what you want to call it, or war purposes, and creating mind control soldiers and just using human subjects as lab mice or guinea pigs. And that's what I think happened. And I'm not dismissing the alien technology, and I'm not dismissing all of that stuff, but I think the core of this was that mind control experiment. And I think if we keep our focus on that, eventually you're going to find something.
Right. We are speaking with Christopher Garetano, and we are talking about the Montauk Chronicles. We're on Beyond the Strange. I am Dave C. And my co-host, Brian Anderson. Brian, do you have any questions you want to bring up?
Well, the one thing I noticed throughout the movie is the sincerity of these gentlemen when they were telling their stories and addressing the camera. Their total conviction of what they were saying. That's the one thing that is the most compelling about the movie itself, in my viewpoint.
Oh, yes. Well, that's the thing, you know, and this is what I was mentioning before. If I went in there with a crew of 7 people, told them what to say, told them how to sit, told them how to speak, and trust me, this is done on television all the time. I've seen Preston interviewed on TV shows. He's very stiff. He's quite inhibited. He does not open up, but in my movie, he does. And that begins, in any good interview, begins with making the subject feel comfortable. But there, like you were saying, there was a lot of sincerity. We started with a great foundation, and we moved forward on that. But there were times, as you also recall, and this was very real, Preston got quite uncomfortable because we make our own memories to a degree, and we edit our own memories because we don't want to remember that things were bad or that we even participated in anything bad. Even, you know, in the movie, if you recall, Preston is questioning the definition of what is bad for a moment because he can't face that he was part. Okay, because if this was true, Preston was part of a mass murder. He cannot shake that one, and that's why he gets so uncomfortable in the film, and literally yells at me for a moment, because you can see that he just doesn't want to face that. Now, that's a very real reaction. That's not the reaction of a man making up a story, in my opinion. And that's just my observation, because that's all we have to go on. So just as you were observing, those interviews were honest. We were getting something out of these guys. You know, Al had already had 2 strokes by the time I interviewed him.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah, there was very honest reactions from this.
Another questions, Brian?
Well, another thing I would have a tendency to point out is that when you're talking about this technology and their skewing of their memories and how everything slows down with human psychology, Matter of fact, with almost any psychology of any living being on the planet Earth, um, whenever you're pressed, in danger, or something's going on, your time sense gets skewed. It literally slows down when you're under tremendous psychological or physical pressure.
Yes, it is. Well, I had a horrible traumatic experience, and I only know from my own experience that's true. But I was at, for some reason, to this day, I can recall those moments vividly, because I guess if time slows down, then you have more of a moment to really observe and really absorb detail, the detail of the situation where you're staying. Your reaction time might slow down, but from my own experience, my memory of the situation is quite vivid and quite detailed. So I was just going on that, because if you, day in, day out, are witnessing boys being beaten to death in some cases over and over and over again for a 13-year period, you must be able to recall a multitude of stories, possibly hundreds of stories, of a situation, or even an experiment. There must be details. It could be encyclopedias worth of information coming from Preston if he were to give us all that information. And there was one point where he knew for sure that my camera was off. Okay. And it was at that moment, because I had removed a lens, and I started to put the camera away. And he, not that he wasn't lucid in the picture, but he really kind of straightened up like a pin for a moment and just said, "You know, Christopher, there's just some things I can't tell you on camera, and I won't tell you." And it was just so unlike Preston. He said a few other things, but it was just so unlike him that leads me to believe there's much more of a complex man that you're seeing in any interview that you've seen with him.
Yeah, well, I go through the same thing. There are certain things I won't state publicly in front of a camera on the show itself. Being as a lot of my background is in aviation, working Air Force projects, secret projects, and everything else, there's a lot of stuff I won't say myself. I mean, outright publicly. One-on-one conversation, I might. It all depends on how I feel about the person. So I can
Sure.
get, so I can get exactly what I know exactly where he's coming from on that.
Yeah, and that's fine. I understand it. I mean, if you're caught in a situation where it might be your life, I don't think you'd be so quick to just release out every piece of information, especially if you're contractually obligated not to. So he says, I mean, he said he signed a few contracts where there's just certain things he can't talk about. What puzzles me is that, well, he is talking about the murder and the brutality, maybe from a bit of a skewed perspective, but it's still there. And wouldn't that be the most severe part of all of this? But again, it's difficult for me to get inside the head of the groups that are running the show here. I've been trying to see it from that perspective. It's very different than the way we think every day. So it takes some time to make an adjustment to your mind and really get inside their heads for a moment.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, just talking about the psychology alone, I can understand how the other two gentlemen would definitely have missing memories, because I mean, what they're describing is the class A mental breakdown of an individual on a mass scale.
Oh,
And
yes.
and it's very easy to eliminate somebody's memory that way. If you're willing to go that far, it's very easy to edit people's memories.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was quite interesting, and I'm sure you did too, that Preston wasn't, he had a difficult time facing what I was bringing up to him, and didn't want to associate himself 100% uh, in the murders, because he was trying to make it sound like, I did what I had to do. My life was threatened. But if you recall, at the very uh, end of the movie, he does say, "I would go back and do it again."
Well, yes. At that time in his life, yeah. I mean, there are things I've done that I wouldn't want to do again, but if given the same circumstances, I would do them again. Just
Well,
because.
it depends on your interests. I mean, Preston, his life is dedicated to science and, of course, science fiction. He's a huge science fiction buff. I had many conversations with him about H.G. Wells, everything from H.G. Wells to Star Trek to everything, and so he was a science fiction buff before his life became a science fiction movie. And by the time he got there, he's this loner who dedicates his whole life to technology, and now he's using alien technology, and now he's in a science fiction film. What a great adventure for someone like that. I'm just trying to think, get inside his head for a moment. And he was in his glory. The thing that puzzles me is that, he doesn't want to face the murder, this mass murder situation, doesn't want to associate himself with it. But if you pay attention to the defensiveness of his reaction, it leads me to believe that he knows deep down he was partially responsible or somewhat responsible. Why would someone get so explosive about it?
Well, and I think on an individual level, he's kind of protecting himself, shielding himself that way as well, by not wanting to associate himself with the mass murders that occurred. I think that's more of a defensive mechanism on his part.
Yes, but anybody that was involved, I guess I haven't really thought about it, and I guess you can't know what you would do unless you were there. But what would you do if you were in this situation? Would you continue to work on a project and watch? I mean, the numbers were in the thousands according to these guys. So, would you watch hundreds of thousands of kids murdered before you? Illegal kidnapping, illegal killing, and continue to do your work every day? Or would you protest with your life? Some people would protest with their lives. They would say, kill me. I'm not doing this for another second. But who knows?
Well, again, go back to the fine line there between genius and insanity as well. I mean, the gentleman is obviously very smart, but I mean, with our own psychological makeup, we can make those distinctions. Is it better for the human race to do this and sacrifice the few for the many? In that instance. So in some cases, I can see it. I can actually go down that path and say, okay, well, we can cut the morality out of this equation and just go with it. And I can run down that path.
It all depends on what it was being used for. If it was for nefarious purposes, kids were being kidnapped and turned into Manchurian type soldiers just for the purpose of whacking out some opponent from some other country for some political assassination. It has nothing to do with saving the world.
I'd like to touch on that when we come back from our next break. We're talking to Chris Garetano, and we're talking about Montauk Chronicles. Man, what an awesome conversation so far. But we will be right back after this.
Welcome back, everyone. This is live on John the Train. Your host and update.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave C., and we are speaking with Christopher Garetano about the Montauk Chronicles. And Chris, I wanted to ask you, you probably get this question a lot, but the alien that was torturing Stewart, where did you come up with that visualization?
Well, number one, I just didn't want to have the same exact carbon copy gray alien over and over and over again. But I did listen to Preston. He described a variety of gray aliens and reptilian-type aliens, and also Stewart described the same. There were a variety of creatures down there, according to them. And so I figured this gray that we had in the scene would represent everything from, the viciousness of the project, how vile it was. I wanted to put all of that into the character, the reptilians that were down there, and the fact that Stewart said that the grays were just hybrids made from human fetuses and then grown to use as these kind of soldier type, almost drones in a way. So I just wanted to put that all into the character, and I didn't want to do the same thing over and over again that we've seen in 100 different movies. And if also you pay attention to the poster, we purposefully, and I came up with the idea of the alien putting the finger to his mouth and saying shh.
Yeah.
The idea is if you look at the hand, it's a human hand. So I wanted to suggest maybe that this could be a charade. That it could be humans putting on this whole show to conceal the real truth of mass murder that's behind it all. It's a little, esoteric, but it's still there, and that's the idea. I mean, one question I asked Stewart was, is it possible, being under the influence of massive amounts of hallucinogens,
Right.
is it possible that somebody came in the room and put this on as even the time travel experiences? They just seem too stagey to me in concept. Like we know, okay, like there was everything from people traveling back to the Civil War to biblical moments, very famous and mythological biblical moments. And I don't know, I just feel like some of that could be implanted memories or staged to cover up something else. And I'm not saying that there weren't, extraterrestrials down there. There may have been, but it could be that that's part of the smokescreen, because what better way to conceal it than to have people come out into the public and tell this tale of monsters and aliens and, conceal this really horrible crime that was committed. And it's one possibility. I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm saying it's certainly one possibility.
Yeah, it's pretty horrific. It's a horrific picture that Stewart is looking at. And talking about the Lost Boys of Montauk, was Stewart one of them, or is that just something that happened to him, one night?
No, Stewart claims to have been one of those boys through a number of years, and then eventually he was absorbed into the project as a teacher or a counselor for other Montauk boys, and that went into his adult life. You know, again, we have these stories, and we have the men telling them, but what I'm looking for at this point is some kind of shred of evidence. So the next step is this, is to go back to the base. You know, I was on a previous show, and it was suggested to me that we go there with a cadaver dog and search for the possibility of a corpse. I mean, if there were this many boys murdered over that period of time, there could be some evidence there. And James Bruce claimed that he remembered boys being dragged out into this, what is now a dry area, but once was a small body of water, a marsh area. And he said he remembers boys being dragged out into the marsh. You know, again, this was a part of a memory that he had. But could it be true? The only thing that leads me to believe that there is a possibility we might find something is somebody slipped up at another place that people I've been speaking to truly feel that they're connected. There's this Dozer School in Florida. If you look it up, it was an orphanage where later the bodies of, I believe, hundreds of boys were found. And there are many people that believe that these were similar situations, that those boys were being used for MKUltra or Montauk Project-like experiments, and that's the corpus delicti. Those are the bodies of the boys that were murdered in the process. And so if someone slipped up enough to where those corpses were still out there at the Dozer School, there's a strong possibility there might be some at Camp Hero. So that's one way. The other way is ground-penetrating radar or X-ray. And another way is, I was on a show, I was on Coast to Coast AM earlier in the year, and somebody heard me on that show and contacted me. I can't say who, but they worked for a major chemical company in the 70s, and they offered a bit of information to me, and it seems factual to me because this person does not want to be revealed because of their pension. They don't want it to be put into jeopardy, but they felt it was necessary to tell me this stuff. So, you know, and they know that I'm an investigator and a filmmaker, so obviously I was going to come out with it or try to further investigate this situation. But they say that they oversaw documents that support things that Preston Nichols said. Now, Preston Nichols and the other gentleman were saying that they would go to Brookhaven Labs, which is a little further west than Camp Hero. That's where they would check in, and then they would travel from Brookhaven under the ground in a railway to Camp Hero, into the Camp Hero facility underground. And the documents that this person saw at this chemical company were shipping an experimental alloy to not only Brookhaven Labs, but to also Camp Hero at the same time, and that there were names on these documents that coincide with Preston's story. And so, of course, these documents were never made public, and this is pretty striking, because if we can get our hands on this stuff, somehow prove them to be true, then I'd say that's the beginning, the small beginning, the paper trail to lead to possibly proving this is real. This was real.
No, it definitely, I'm convinced, that's for sure. I wanted to bring in one of our friends of the show, and actually he's a big part of the show, Les Johnson. He is also a producer of one of our famous shows that's out there, Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. And again, you know, he's a friend of the show, and he wanted to come on and bring up some questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem.
Les, you want to talk to Chris?
Hi, Chris. How you doing? You're doing great tonight, by the way. You sound great.
Oh, thank you.
One question I had, and it's concerning one of the authors of some pretty famous books, the Missing 411 books. David Paulides, I believe his name is. And your movie. he just came out with a new book called A Sobering, the Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, where he talks about not missing kids or missing people per se in Woodland or our state parks, but people that are missing in near cities, near colleges. They all seem to have the same MO. They all seem to be very intelligent. They all seem to just disappear. And then some of them will reappear. Only one or two have been found alive. And I'm wondering if that could be, could some of those, ones that, reappear and there's no, they cannot find causes of death for these people. A lot of times they're found in bodies of water. And I'm just wondering if it could be part of an ongoing Montauk Chronicles.
I believe it could be, Wes. I believe that very much so, and I think that's how we're going to find this thing. Now, there's some weird coincidences because I think we might be getting, closer and closer as we go along to getting the truth. And the way we're doing this is we're taking it seriously. I don't mean to suggest that we should always avoid stories of the giant Sasquatch or any of that stuff that has been said has occurred at Montauk, but if we start paying attention to what you were just saying, or what David was putting in his books, and not to force the association, but the fact is, Alfred Bielik and Preston Nichols did say that these things were not just happening in Montauk, but they're happening all over the country and all over the world. So, yeah, these things could be related, and I think the more information we just carefully collect, carefully pay attention, look for coincidences, or I'm sorry, similarities between the situations, and then really just try and find documents, somehow find something. I mean, I wouldn't just pass off the Dozer School as some maniac that lived in that orphanage and was just killing kids. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I feel like that seems like a program to me. That seems like some kind of organized situation where these boys died over there. And if it was happening over there, and we were able to prove that it was happening in MK Ultra, and then you have these things that David wrote about in his book that he's I don't know if he's specifically suggesting what they are. He's just trying to bring them to light. Yeah, I mean that's the furthering of the investigation for sure, because you have to consider if it was happening at Montauk, it's happening all over. A couple of things that I want to note is, okay, we might be getting closer to the truth talking about this as we are tonight, and it's funny how Alfred Bielik said, because programs like this need to be funded, and funded with a great deal of money. Yeah, it could be skimmed off of some weird, edge of the taxpayers' money throughout the country, whatever resources they're taking from. But Hal said that the entire Montauk project, so to speak, was funded by Nazi gold, a stolen train of gold, which in major news not too long ago, maybe a week or two ago, guess what they discovered? The train that Al said funded the Montauk project has now been discovered inside a cave in Poland. And so that, I don't know, that could be fakery. That could be a fake story planted to distract people from furthering, any kind of proof in regard to the Montauk situation, because for something like this to have occurred, there needed to be some money behind it. And if it's true that it was funded by that gold, and now they say, well, we just found the train, so how was it funded? Little things like that. And then, of course, Netflix is coming out with a series called Stranger Things, which is based off the Montauk Project.
Okay.
So more things come out in popular fiction. It's I would say it's a distraction. But I appreciate the point of view that you're thinking in the direction of that this thing was true and that we're paying attention to the murders, because I think, hey, if you can prove that some of these things are connected and that some of the murders happened, everything else is later. It's secondary to that proof, and I think that's where we should start. The only other thing that concerns me is you know, and I think about this every time I talk about it on a show or even write about it and prepare to shoot more stuff for the second volume, is I don't know if I'm putting myself in danger, and not to sound dramatic, because I'm not, you know, at all, you know, outside of just making a movie, but I don't know if I'm pissing somebody off, you know, and the
becoming
last thing
a target.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to think sensibly, and I can't sit here and lie to you and say, "Oh yeah, of course I know that there was a monster down there," and yes, I sat in the Montauk chair myself, and of course I traveled all over time, and time travel. Yeah, you know, there are a lot of great minds that claim that these things are all real and very possible. I always look for credible witnesses, but the thing I'm focusing on, and the thing that I believe happened, was that there was a mind control program at Montauk, and not only there, in other places in the world. And I just want to see if I can find more people that may have been involved, and more people that want to step forward with something close to evidence. And now that you mentioned this, I definitely want to read that new book.
If you ever get a chance, I would literally suggest getting in touch with that man. He's very intelligent, and he's put a lot of effort into those books. And I really appreciate what you're doing, Christopher, because there are a lot of people out there that could have been part of these experiments, and they're either too scared, or they don't remember, or they think it was part of some fever dream, or who knows. I just have a feeling getting that knowledge out there was very, very important. And I just wanted to thank you. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Les, for asking those questions and coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. You have a good night. Yeah. It's a great show so far. Great show. Thank you very much.
Chris is awesome. Thanks again, Les. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's an interesting point that Les brought up. I know I live up here in Northern California, and I live pretty close to Yosemite.
Oh wow!
And there was a lot of missing people in the Yosemite area, and I think David Pilates was also talking about that as well. But I've been to Yosemite, a couple of times. It's a beautiful place, but it can be a dangerous place, and it'll look like that. People have been going missing, and there's just no explanation for it.
Yeah. What does David suggest? I mean, does he suggest that it's a creature, or is it a UFO abduction, or does he ever really suggest what it is?
I'm not exactly sure. Brian, do you have any info on that?
I don't think he actually goes with any suggestion as to what it is, other than it's very peculiar. And in some cases, I think he suggests that it's aliens are involved in the disappearances.
Huh. I mean, I guess if you try and get inside, okay, let's say these programs are still occurring, and all right, maybe they can't take runaway kids off the street anymore. It's not as easy as it was in the 70s. So if you're looking for human subjects, and of course you're not going to get volunteers for something, or at least volunteers in droves for something that they're going to most likely die during the experiment, how would the mind operate? How many people go out into these state parks alone, and that we could cover it up and make it look like they just disappeared into the ether, or disappeared into the wilderness and we can't find them, or they find the body later. I mean, if you get inside this kind of insidious way of thinking, if you let it absorb into your mind, start to think like someone in one of these programs. How am I going to get away with this? Yeah, I mean, I guess if I were them, that's a possibility. I mean, go and grab people that are out by themselves. Yeah, and then they'll never to be seen again, or we'll find them later floating in the river. Hey, it was an accident. I mean, they think like this. The CIA thought like this when they were doing weird covert stuff in Black Ops. So we know that that's the way the mind operates in that sense, and that's where you should start. They don't think like we do. And I think once you get past that threshold and you start to say, okay, now I'm going to get in the mind of this kind of insidious plan and really think like the bad guy for a minute, anything becomes possible. So.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to think about it. I mean, we're talking millions of people a year go missing just off the face of the earth, and most of the time nothing's found.
Right. And so I wonder, is it that easy to go missing, or is it, these? Because I don't believe that these programs ended in 1983. I think this is an ongoing thing, especially if it's if you want to believe in the idea put forth that we're constantly monitored, constantly manipulated. I know we're being manipulated by advertising and the news and things like that. Of course we are. But to what degree? That's the question. And for what purpose? Well, there are many purposes, but there are a few clues here and there that always reinforce this idea for me, because it is true. I mean, okay, as a culture, let's say, in the United States, as a culture in the United States or most places in the world, we're told, at least by the officials who are running the show, that psychic abilities are something of fiction, and it's left to entertainment. And yeah, you can have your psychics and your mediums and all that stuff, but we all know the ability exists. We all have it. We've all experienced it to some degree.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is, you have the officials telling you this is a kind of a joke, but they're using it. CIA had, the Central Intelligence had remote viewing programs. They were experimenting with this stuff, and I'm sure they are to this moment. So my question is, why isn't there any learning institution, anything implemented at an early age to heighten psychic abilities, or use them as if for a child practicing? Something as the CIA is doing just with grown adults. So we know that they've done this. These things are out there. And we just have to collectively understand that these things happen. Start with.
I'm sorry, Chris. I seem to be kind of breaking up a little bit. Are you still there?
Oh yeah, can you hear me okay?
Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah, it was just breaking up a little bit, but no, that's okay. No, totally agree. Especially with the remote viewing, I've been hearing more about it in the last few years. You touched on that in your movie, and with the CIA and or with this project. There was a lot of psychics as far as the kids go, that made it more up into like another level of some sort, I guess. And they were the ones that were going and doing this space and time travel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I tried to represent that the best way possible. What happened was there was the first years of the program, Alfred Bielek and Preston Nichols claimed that in the early years, the boys were extremely expendable. They were just being kidnapped and killed by the hundreds, and they were expendable, and they would use them and they would beat them, and they wouldn't care about how the children felt. They would keep them locked up in the worst situations you could imagine. Things I didn't even represent in the film because people would be walking away from it. And so Alfred Bielek claims that he offered an alternative. And what he said to the guys who were running the show was that, why don't you change your approach a little bit, stop, beating them to death, and offer them something where they're a little more cooperative. Offer them a trust fund. And the idea was that if they did make it through, if they did survive, when they got out, they would be rich. They would be high. They would have a fine education. They would be set for life. So there, he was suggesting that a lot of people that did make it out of that came into society as a very wealthy people, very well-educated people that may have started off as runaways. And so people who did survive the early stages of the program were then absorbed into the time travel experiments. The way I represented it in the movie was, you heard the voiceover of the Jack Pruitt character telling the boy, all these wonderful things. Your life is going to be perfect after this, knowing that the kid is expendable and most likely would die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted to show in it, that it was a false promise, even though they were, they may have changed the approach and made this promise of this, the stipend and the trust fund, even though the kids would be expendable. And I think that's represented in things we can prove, like the Tuskegee experiments. Those men were told they were getting free medical care, and the faction of government that was using this situation, a completely false situation, telling American citizens at the time, hey, you're going to get free medical care, and injecting them with a horrible disease so they could covertly monitor them for a number of years. That's sick, man. I mean, like, really sick stuff. And that's why I find it hard to put it past the same group of people, especially after learning MK Ultra is almost identical to the alleged Montauk experiment. So I truly believe that these things happen. The things that I can't confirm are the really, things that are like parallel and tantamount to all science fiction. I'm carefully going through it and trying to find more details as I go before I make a declaration. It's true.
No, it was all represented very well in the movie. And you also spoke about how, well, not you, I'm sorry, but Stewart was talking about how the Nazis' involvement with, making their people, drinking the water with fluoride and mercury in the food, and it was all to basically turn people into walking antennas for future programming, and that's a scary thought.
Yes, and that information has been out there for a while. I mean, there's a book called The Nazis and the Occult by Paul Rowland. Check that one out. And then there's several books on the subject matter. Another one called Secret Societies. It's an older book. It's out of print now by Norman McKenzie. These books, all of that information has been out in the world for quite some time now. And, and a lot of it can be cross-reference to factual information. These things were being done, really bizarre stories. But the thing is that most people aren't exposed to these stories and don't really know how true they are. So then when they hear about the Montauk experiments for the first time, it's overwhelming because, and it feels like fiction because it's just about every possibility that you can think of rolled into one story. And that, I think, obscures, the center of it all, which is this mind control experiment, which is very believable and has happened. And then we've been able to prove it. So a lot of those same people don't understand that we've been able to prove that experiments have happened that are basically identical to this thing. And it's just like saying, hey, okay, it happened here for sure, just about the same thing. Why would you put it past the same, nucleus to make it happen in other places too around the same time? And I think, like I said, I think we're close to finding out that what I'm saying is very true. And I think once we could prove that, then I would look into the other technologies things. Like on the next film, I'm going to talk to Preston Nichols. He claims to have, again, he makes that claim that his IQ is through the roof. And he also, when I was out at his place, I was out there twice, he said that he has all of the equipment there. So I'm going to ask him politely to demonstrate some of this technology for us. If he's able to do it, then let's do it. Let's see it work. Why not? Let's see it work once and for all.
That would be amazing. We are speaking with Christopher Garetano about the Montauk Chronicles. This is Beyond the Strange, and I am Dave C. Chris, we have a listener on Twitter who's by the name of Allison Bell, who would love to ask you a question.
Sure.
She wants to know, what you think about the harp and the voice of God technology being used on the people.
Well, I guess the harp technology would be, later incarnations of what was being developed, Allison. That the thing is, we can't forget that the alleged Montauk Project and things like that were all leading to something. These were early experiments that were meant to lead somewhere. And I suspect that the harp technology is a later incarnation of what was being developed. I don't think these are all scattered programs with completely different purposes and with a nucleus that's unaware of the other. I think this is all coming from the same core. So the more we hear about these things, I think they are derivatives of moments like the Montauk Project and things like that. And the fact that we're talking about it, it's a little different than talking about, and which I'm interested in too, but a little different than talking about like a Sasquatch expedition or something like that. We're taking this very seriously, and a lot of us are really talking about it. And I think the people who have been trying to conceal this for quite some time might be a little nervous at this point, because it's not just me, and it's not just 20 other people, writing documents and talking about it, and but it's a lot of people. I think it's quite overwhelming, and I don't think they can hide it anymore. So what you might see soon is a series of distractions and admissions, half admissions, kind of like Bill Clinton admitted sort of to the MK Ultra experiments and the Tuskegee experiments in 1995. So as we get closer to try and investigate things like HARP and like the Montauk Project, you're going to see other things thrown out there to placate us. A little admission here, a little revelation here. Never the big picture, though. And I think you should just trust your own instinct and continue to do your own research and put the pieces together. And the more we find, I guess the closer we're going to be. The question is, though, do you really want to find out the truth? Because in my opinion, I've thought about it for decades. It's pretty terrifying. So.
Absolutely terrifying. And before we go to break, I have one more quick question for you. Do you believe we are going to have disclosure?
Yeah, I do. I think, like I was just saying, no, it's going to be some kind of half-assed admission. It's going to be very slow. I don't know if it's weird. What are they going to say? Disclosure in terms of extraterrestrial beings, or disclosure of these experiments, or both?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think if it's going to be something, like you said, it's going to be generic, and try to explain some of the lights in the sky, or some of the weird things that are happening, with our climate and that sort of thing. But I was just interested in getting your take on it.
Well, I think we already know the answer to a lot of this stuff, and we know that this stuff has happened. We have enough evidence, and there are, for the most important part of this, there are enough credible witnesses out there. You don't have to listen to the guy that is half drunk and high and ran out of the woods to tell you he saw a UFO. You have astronauts, you have physicists, you have scientists that have seen these things, guys that you can trust at least a little bit. Why on earth would they be telling you these stories that they saw these things? So listen, disclosure happened already. The only thing that hasn't happened is that the president didn't get on TV to tell you it's okay to believe it. But we've already had disclosure. It's out there. Edgar Mitchell, Gordon Cooper, all these people that went out there and claimed to have seen these things that are credible people. I would say that's disclosure, or at least the beginning of it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. We're going to go to our last break, and when we come back, we'd like to talk about your future projects, especially with the South Texas Blues. And
great.
We want to get into that. So everyone stick around. This is Beyond the Strange. I am Dave C. We're talking with Christopher Garetano, and we will be back. And we are back. This is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave C., and we are speaking with Christopher Garetano, the Montauk Chronicles. Chris, I have to apologize at the beginning of the show. I did not get a chance to read your bio. It was sort of a live radio faux pas, if you will.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not, no worries.
I totally apologize for that. But I do want to get into the South Texas Blues.
All right. Well, let's see. Do you want me to explain the story really quick?
Yes, please.
Okay, South Texas Blues is something near and dear to my heart because I feel like it's a perspective that's lost along the way. It really is about, it's a story about Tobe Hooper, the director, who went on to become a big Hollywood director, but at the time in 1973, he wasn't. He was a completely independent guy. He had not broken into the film industry yet, and in the summer of 1973, he was on the set of an extraordinarily difficult set, and it was the set of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the infamous motion picture.
Yes,
but the perspective, yes, and the perspective that I'm trying to establish in this story is, at the time of the making of the film, this is a man who wholeheartedly wanted to break into the film industry and put everything he had into this picture, because he had only really made one picture before it and a couple of documentaries, but he hasn't made it yet, and he was already in his 30s, and he needed to push this thing forward. Now, he had no idea what was about to happen, and that's the greatest thing about this story, is that it's about the hardships of making this picture. I mean, there was insanity on the set. There was, 120-degree heat on the interior of the house that they were shooting in. There was difficulties all over. There was a 32-hour shoot, sleep deprivation, all of these things that these guys had to go through to make this movie. Mm-hmm. And it just shows the passion of someone who's putting their heart and soul into something, and they have no idea of the result, where it's going to go. Remember, he wasn't Tobe Hooper, the horror director at the time, and he had not a clue. Everybody kind of turned their backs on this guy, and my story ends not at some glorious film festival or at the big premiere. It ends with him alone in his kitchen cutting the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a Steenbeck, with everybody that he knows that basically turned their backs on him, thinking that this movie would never come out. And he has no idea what's about to happen. And that's a wonderful, not to give away the ending, it's not like this big twist ending, it's just, that I think is the epitome of this story, is that you're not supposed to know. And so from that idea, because that was one of the first ideas that I had, I did a lot of research as to how this thing came about, the details of the story, and I made a bit of a Don Quixote type story of Tobe Hooper kind of imagining things along the way. So there are fantasy sequences and creatures and things like that he kind of imagines in his mind while he's shooting this picture. It's very psychedelic, very fantasy-oriented picture, but it's also based in a lot of fact. And in 2012, I translated my screenplay into graphic novel form with artist Trevor Cook, and it was published in Fangoria magazine for a year. It was serialized in every issue, a few panels in every issue. And now we're going to make it into a movie. I can't wait to make it into a picture. It's a really great story, and I'm currently on Indiegogo trying to raise some initial money to get it going. But since I've been doing that, a lot of people have shown interest. A lot of great artists and a lot of great people, and I think the idea is to keep that spirit the same. Everybody has a passion for this story that wants to be part of it. They all have a passion for it. They're all ready to push to the greatest heights. We're not making any big claims outside of, hey, we're going to make a great movie, we just know it. And we're going to put everything into it. And there's some great people that are behind it, like Edwin Neal, who played the hitchhiker in the original Texas Chainsaw. He loves the script. He's been a supporter of what I'm doing. And he's going to be part of the film as an associate producer and really back us up throughout all of this. And what a great guy to have on the set. And we're going to be using a lot of the original locations that crew shot the movie at, because some of those places are still intact. And even the house, the original house is intact.
Yes.
goal is to use the interior and some of the exterior of the house where they shot the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. So, we're getting close, and it's been years in the development and years of me really wanting to tell this story. But I think it's an important story to tell, and hopefully we'll be on the set shooting it by March. After rigorous pre-production and really solid planning. So if anybody wants to check this out, you can go to Indiegogo.com and search South Texas Blues, or go to SouthTexasBlues.com. And there'll be a lot more about this down the road. And another picture I'm doing is the Ghosts of Montauk. It's a follow-up to Montauk Chronicles. And then another paranormal docudrama that I'll start shooting in November is, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say It's a very unique perspective on the Sasquatch legend. It's a saturated subject matter that I feel I can bring new life to and make it very exhilarating, very exciting, very spooky, and very different. And it's something I really want to do, and something I've wanted to do since I was a kid. So I definitely have a passion for the subject matter, and I have not seen anybody approach this situation like I'm going to. So I'm really looking forward to starting that.
Yes, we're looking forward to that too. And I haven't seen too many films on Sasquatch, to be honest. I've only seen the reality TV shows, of course, that are like on History or Discovery Channel, but a full-fledged movie would be awesome, and that's something to look forward to. I'd like to ask you a quick question. Again, we have another friend of the show that's on Twitter right now, and she had a question. Are you familiar with Corey Goode?
No. Who's Corey Goode?
Corey Goode and David Wilcock. You're familiar with David Wilcock?
I am. I've heard of David. Yes.
Well, they both have. They both talk about disclosure, and they both talk about the evidence that's being gathered about it. And one of the questions that Lynn had is, what does Chris think about the information Corey Goode is releasing about his experiences? But of course, you're not really familiar with him. But
no, I'd love to learn more about Corey. I just didn't know.
Yeah, no, it's fine. But and she was just wondering about that. And we're also going to bring Les back on. He had a few questions. We have my producer Stephanie, who you spoke to earlier. She's having some audio issues, and for some reason we can't get her back on the show to ask you directly. But she's been able to talk to Les, and Les wanted to bring those questions up. So there you go, Les.
Hi again, Christopher. First of all, I'd like to apologize. Stephanie can't make it on. We had originally watched your movie together when you did the screening for Fade to Black. Now, the reason both her and myself didn't watch the whole movie the first time, because in the middle of your movie, she had a panic attack because she started having flashbacks of some things that started to happen to her. I have a few questions from her, and she's one of those people that I was alluding to that may be one of those thousands, okay? Believe it or not, the producer of this show may be one of those people. I'm not quite sure. First question she has, ask him, have you had any reports since the movie that involve girls or women?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was told that there were girls down there for sure. So, this just doesn't seem to be the focus, but Alfred and Preston said that there were girls down there used in some of the experiments in regard to the boys, getting them to do certain things, even experimented upon in similar ways. I think it's a time now to kind of bring that to light and focus on that. And those are some of the questions I certainly will be asking Preston for the second volume. And Stuart, I want to learn more about that because it's important.
Okay, thank you. And the second question I have for you from her, do these places have, what do these places have in common? Power stations, underground water dams, etc.? In other words, is it just, do Do all these things have the same thing in common where these experiments happen?
Not all of them. The one thing that they have in common, one way or another, is that they're well stocked with subjects. And the subjects meaning boys, girls, whatever they're using human subjects. And so whether it be the Dozer School, again, we haven't been able to prove it, but still I believe, and other people believe this too, that was another experiment. There are some similarities between some of these places because there are other bases that apparently this happened at, but then if you go to places like the Dozer School, or apparently there was another place upstate New York that was being used as well. So we don't know. I mean, who knows? And I don't want to just keep throwing out accusations, but you don't know if kids away at summer camp were being used for some of these experiments. There were kids in schools that were being used, according to James Bruce. He literally said, and again, this might be a a tall claim, but then again, maybe not, that the parents were involved in some of this stuff, and some of the teachers were, and he said that his principal was involved. So this could be much greater than what we think it is in terms of its covert nature. There could have been a lot of other people involved, and in that case, it's terrifying because everything that we know is not exactly as we know it. I mean, even the things closest to us, it's very different.
Do you think a lot of these children quite possibly have their families possibly involved in the military as well? That the military families were using their own children as experiments in these experiments?
I've heard that too. And then there were cases where I guess families were offered money. In James Bruce's case, he said his father was offered money. But there's a whole other story behind James Bruce that he did tell. I did interview him for 3 hours, but I just couldn't fit it all in 1 2-hour movie and everybody else's tale. So he was part of a very traumatic situation as a child, and maybe he was sought out because of that. He was around a very violent situation growing up, and I don't know if I should tell the full tale at the moment, but he did grow up at a slaughterhouse out east Long Island, and there were, I don't know, it could be part of the reason, those traumatic moments could have all been what they were looking for, or even influenced, especially if his relatives were involved somehow.
Gotcha. Well, that's all the questions did she put any more questions on Twitter, guys?
I haven't seen any.
Okay. Well, if you do have a chance, Chris, I would suggest quite possibly you might want to talk to Stephanie. I can say that, and I'm sorry. She had planned on asking you these questions for herself, but for some strange reason, we've never had a problem with Hangouts before. Every time she tries to get on, it hangs up on her.
Yeah, we're having difficulties for some reason.
No worries. I can be contacted easily, and I'm happy to further the conversation, and especially if it can lead to more information or more revelation for another volume, or even just for my own peace of mind.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and I'm sure Dave can, or Steph herself can get you that information after the show. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Thanks again, guys, for letting me back on.
Thanks, Les.
See ya.
Brian, do you have anything that you want to ask Chris before the end of the show?
I just have one maybe possible observation. These experiments supposedly were to have stopped in 1983. I wonder if maybe, because about that time we had all the missing children being posted on the backside of milk cartons about that time. It became really, it became really proliferant. And I'm just wondering if maybe that didn't slow them in a way.
Yeah, maybe because people were catching on. And again, some younger folks can't imagine a world without the internet, but we didn't have it back then, and there wasn't all this rapid fire communication. There weren't many cell phones at all, and it was easier to get away with some of this stuff. I mean, that's why I think a majority of the most infamous serial killers were out there doing their thing and getting away with it, even though they're in abundance now. Regardless, I don't know how they're getting away with half the things they're getting away with, but yeah, I mean, there could be pressures, and that's why certain things were changed. But James Bruce's situation almost began as that experiment was allegedly ending. So he said that when that thing was kind of ending, that's when his situation began, and it carried on in so many ways. So maybe they were taking it from this covert situation down beneath Camp Hero to the classrooms. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, they had, and I don't know if this was just, a time where people were a little less politically correct and all, but they had a situation where three people would come into the room, I guess, handlers of kids at the time, or teachers, or the principal, and start removing kids. And they would say this in front of all of the kids: we're taking these kids away because they're gifted, and we're bringing them to the gifted classes. So they would remove a certain number of kids and then take them into another room. And, I found that to be really, at the time, even kind of offensive to a very young kid who's like, you have these adults telling everybody else in the room, you guys aren't gifted, but these kids are, and taking them to another room. But what was the gifted class? What were they teaching them? What were they trying to figure out? Why weren't all the kids allowed to just learn together? Interesting, right? And this isn't like AP English in high school. This was like, kindergarten, first grade, gifted kids. How are they gifted? I want to know.
Well, yeah, I can remember when I was that age, I was always taken out of class, and I was given tests, written tests, all the time. I mean, it seemed like it was like once a week where, maybe there were one or two, maybe three others that went with, but they would pull us out. And this was in California. They would pull us out to take these tests at random. And it seemed, I mean, my memory, it seems like it was like once a week, if not once a month, where everybody else stayed in class.
Well, I would question as to exactly what was going on. What were they trying to find? Were they trying to find the next mathematician or another astronaut? Or were they, and under what influence is the question? Who was seeking you out? Just like scouts come and watch guys play football in high school and college. Who was seeking out these intelligent kids at a very young age?
Yeah, see, and I never got any answers to that. It was like, oh, okay, it was just part of the norm as a kid. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this is what we need to do. Okay, let's go do it. And as a kid, you don't question that.
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, I had witnessed abuse when I was a kid in school, and it wasn't questioned because you just didn't know any better. But I also remember a situation of being taken out, other kids being removed from the class and separated into different groups. And I think at this time, this is where you were taken out of class, and this is where James Bruce was removed from the class as well. At this current time, James Bruce is in his mid-40s. So I don't know. I mean, or even late 40s. Like he was a kid at the time when the Montauk Project was so-called Montauk Project was ending, and he said that he dealt with Alfred Bielek after the fact. So the project didn't end as they claimed it did.
No, not at all. And Chris, I just wanted to say that we got Steph back on here, I believe. So, Steph, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, there she is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so happy to talk to you, and your work means so much to me.
Thank you.
That movie just...
I'm sorry I traumatized you.
Oh, no, it's okay. You didn't do it. I think that this is so widespread, and I really don't know how to put my thoughts into words now that I'm on air, but I mean, this is horrific.
It is. Yeah, it's terrifying. I've had a lot of anxiety and a lot of panic attacks over this, and I'm always apprehensive about, even talking about it, but then all of a sudden I'm on one of these shows and I just say what's on my mind, so I don't know what to think sometimes.
Right. The other question that I really had on my mind, and it's kind of a specific thing about the drowning. This is the same kind of psychological warfare as waterboarding, right? and it is
Sure.
super
Yeah,
effective.
yeah. I mean, well, there's a purpose of the trauma is to make the person so uninhibited where they're releasing information.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's what's happening. When they're also trying to break the psyche down so they can implant the mind control.
Right. How do you recover? How do you put all of that back together? Is that possible to recover all of those memories and and unsplinter your mind?
You mean if it happened personally to you? Do you mean that how can you recover these things for sure? Like if you're just seeing short recollections of them, or you feel this may have happened to you?
Right. Flashes of memories, but nothing's connected.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I have a similar experience. I don't know. I suspect, and I haven't gone through this myself yet, but maybe some kind of regression might help with someone who's experienced enough and has a track record. Maybe some kind of hypnotherapy session or something. I know that Whitley Strieber did something like that to recall a lot of his splintered memories. Possibly something like that.
I need to do that.
Because it will just drive you crazy to sit and hang on these images that are really disturbing you, but they're there, and you want to know why they're there.
Right, and you've got this puzzle that you can't put together because there's missing pieces.
I think some kind of hypnotherapy session, if you're willing to submit yourself to that, and trust me as a filmmaker, I would love to document it somehow, or at least to some degree. I would be very respectful. But I want to see people who believe that they were part of this, and then if we can get a very reputable hypnotherapist to kind of bring that out of the subject, that's very interesting to me. I want to see if we can get some details.
Well, we really need to do that. I agree.
Well, I appreciate that. You'd be in good hands, and I just need to find somebody reputable enough that can do this session. I want to find somebody that's really good, that we can trust, and they have a decent track record of the subject.
Okay.
Well, Chris, now that we consider you a friend of the show, we'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll send that information. I'm sure Steph will love to keep in touch with you and let you know about what she finds out.
Of course, thank you. I appreciate it. No, I mean, we would shoot it for Ghosts of Montauk, if that's okay.
That'd be great. Anything you
That'd
need,
be awesome.
I'm willing.
Thanks, Steph. And Chris, before we go, where can we find your info and where can we find your latest projects and that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, if you go to MontaukChronicles.com, you can read all about it, watch the trailer. If you're interested, you can pick up the DVD or special edition Blu-ray. There are a lot of great extras on both of the discs, but the Blu-ray has a full base exploration, all of the extended interviews, 2 making-of documentaries that also appear on the DVD. It's a great collection of information, and also the 2-hour movie if you really want to get into this subject matter. So it can be ordered there or on Amazon.com, and if you want to learn more about South Texas Blues, you can go to southtexasblues.com or search for it on Indiegogo.com.
Right, and as far as Twitter and social media?
Sure, well, we have the Montauk Chronicles official Twitter, and then my Twitter is Garetano7, so it's my last name and then number 7. Or Christopher Garetano, you can search, and then we're on Facebook as well, and so you could, we're all over the place, and if you have a question, you can email me from the website. It goes to me, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Awesome, Chris. It's been an amazing evening, and again, I want to appreciate you for coming on the show, and I really appreciate it, and thank you for coming on to the show and just rapping with us about everything, and we hope to have you back sometime.
Oh, anytime. No, it was a great show tonight. I really appreciate it. And it helps me figure things out too that I get to speak about it. So, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that about wraps it up, guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I want to thank everybody who put their questions in, and sorry I couldn't get to everybody. I really wanted to. The time just seemed to fly by, and Steph, I'm so sorry that we had so many issues tonight.
I hate it too,
I mean,
but we'll figure it out. I think it's.
yes.
I don't think it's coincidence. I mean, it's not a coincidence. I've never had a problem like that before. What the hell?
Right. We've never had a problem with you coming on here and talking on Hangouts and stuff. And
Right.
man, it's just been horrible. Brian, thanks again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love doing this. And everybody just have a safe week, please. And Steph, hang in there.
Hey, we got this.
Yeah,
It's
Steph,
all
hang in
good.
there. Again, we can always probably contact Chris and let him know what's going on. And yeah.
Let's spread the truth and change the world.
Yeah, I mean, we need a lot, and so lots more change. But we got to start somewhere, right?
Exactly.
But, exactly. But thanks again, guys. I appreciate you guys being on here. And yeah, that's it for the show. Again, this was Beyond the Strange with Christopher Garetano with Montauk Chronicles. I'm your host, Dave C. We have Brian Anderson and Steph, holographic. And thanks again, everybody. Have a good night. Be safe. Enjoy the supermoon if you get a chance. And we're out of here.